13. Luan Nam. An elderly Cambodian crocodile farmer named Luan Nam was tending to his animals alone one morning in May when one of the reptiles pulled on the stick he was using to corral her out of her cage. And as a result, he fell into the enclosure and was mauled by dozens of crocodiles. There was no hope of him surviving. The reptiles quickly devoured him, leaving the area covered in blood and mangled remains. Nam's family found what was left of his body after the crocodiles devoured his arms and a leg, leaving the rest of him covered in bites. For years, Nam's family had been urging him to quit the crocodile farming business, and for obvious reasons. It's an inherently dangerous business, but it's profitable, mainly catering to buyers in China, Thailand, and Vietnam who slaughter the crocodiles and use their skin to make leather and other products. Nam enjoyed what he did for a living and was even president of his local Crocodile Farmers Association. And he was unwilling to give up the business, even at his family's urging. Following the 72-year-old's death, the family revealed that they were considering selling his stock of 40 crocodiles, which he kept at his farm in Siem Reap. There are several crocodile farms in the area, and an estimated 900 throughout Cambodia, making it somewhat surprising that accidents like this don't happen more often. 12. Jordan Rivera. To beat the long lines at a bar in Port Charlotte, Florida one night in May of 2023, 23-year-old Jordan Rivera decided to urinate in a pond behind the business. Things took a terrifying turn, though, when he misstepped and fell into the water, where he was attacked by a 10-foot, 3-meter alligator. Rivera screamed for help as the reptile clamped its jaws down on his arm. But luckily, several bar patrons heard him and rushed over to help. While it was too late to save the bottom half of Rivera's arm, their quick action meant that he'd survive the attack. Bystanders then applied a tourniquet to his arm to prevent him from bleeding to death, while they waited for paramedics to arrive. Speaking with NBC2 from his hospital bed, Rivera said that he had no memory of what happened after he tripped and fell. The next thing he remembered was waking up in the emergency room. But he was surprised to notice that his arm was no longer there, because it felt like it was. Rivera credited the Good Samaritans who answered his calls for help with saving his life. He said he was grateful to lose his arm rather than his life, and that he hoped for an opportunity to thank his rescuers in the future. 11. Heidi Ernst. During a trip to the Bahamas in June 2023, 73-year-old Heidi Ernst went on a scuba diving excursion off Taino Beach. The Iowa native is a seasoned scuba diver with more than 500 dives under her belt. But no amount of experience can completely protect someone from danger. She was standing on the boat's ladder when she felt something bite down on her calf. And when Heidi looked back, she saw a shark's head moving from side to side as the creature tore into her leg. Luckily, she found the strength to fight the shark off and was quickly removed from the water by people she was with. And thanks to the quick first aid she received, Heidi survived the attack. She was stabilized at a local hospital and then was airlifted to another medical facility in Miami, where doctors discovered that her leg was infected. They ended up having to amputate, and Heidi required multiple subsequent surgeries and blood transfusions. According to the most recent updates on the case, she still faces a long road to recovery. During an interview with ABC News, Heidi said that she didn't see the shark approach her. Then, out of nowhere, she felt like she'd been hit by a truck. She described the experience as similar to a scene from a horror movie, but she's determined not to let her newfound setbacks stop her from living life to the fullest. And she's not going to let the traumatic incident keep her out of the water. Even after losing a leg, Heidi plans to continue scuba diving. And she's even started researching gear for amputees. 10. Ella Reed. A teenager named Ella Reed was spending time with her friends at Fort Pierce Beach in Florida one afternoon in May 2023 when a 6-foot-long, or 2-meter bull shark rushed up to her in shallow water and bit her in the side. Reed later told Local 10 News that the main thing she remembered was how powerful the shark was and how hard it hit her when it rammed into her. She punched the creature in the face and swam away with a cut on her arm and finger. A short while later, Reed noticed that the unwelcome visitor had returned and was circling her in the water. She yelled for her mother as the shark attacked her for a second time. When Reed's mom looked over, she saw that her daughter was covered in blood. The teen was pulled from the water and taken to a nearby hospital with injuries to her stomach, arm, finger, and knee. She received 19 stitches, but said that she didn't initially feel the pain because her adrenaline was running at full force. As terrifying as the attack was, Reed said that she wasn't going to let the attack stop her from returning to the water once she recovered. 9. Escaped monkey mauls single mom. While enjoying a peaceful Sunday afternoon at her home in Dixon, Oklahoma in March 2023, a single mom named Brittany Parker was attacked by her neighbor's escaped pet monkey. Seemingly out of nowhere, the primate appeared on her porch and began pacing back and forth. The monkey became increasingly agitated as he jumped off the railing, banged on Parker's storm door, and ripped the door handle off, prompting Parker to dial 911. By the time officers arrived, the monkey had calmed down. Thinking it was safe to exit the house, Parker went outside with her son. But the monkey immediately crawled up Parker's back, yanked several chunks of hair out of her scalp, and tore her ear nearly in half, leaving it basically hanging by a thread. Afterward, she was taken to the hospital where she received a rabies shot and treatment for her injuries. At the time the story broke, she said that she'd need plastic surgery to fully repair the damage to her ear. The monkey vanished for several hours after the attack, but Parker's friend tracked the rogue animal down and euthanized it later that day. In addition to her physical injuries, Parker was left emotionally traumatized and concerned for the safety of herself, her family, and her neighborhood in the aftermath of the attack. She told local station KXII that she was unaware her neighbor owned a monkey until the day of the attack. Parker called for stronger laws governing exotic pet ownership in Oklahoma, which is well known for its lax policies, and she believes that exotic pet owners should be required to undergo special training and certification. Dixon Police Chief Tim Duncan said that the agency receives animal-related calls all the time, but that the call about the monkey was so unusual that he and other officers were unsure whether they'd heard the report correctly. It was also unclear whether any crimes had been committed, so the sheriff forwarded the report to the district attorney to make the final call on whether to move forward with any charges. 8. Gruesome grizzly encounter. A 21-year-old park worker was planting trees at a wildlife refuge in Canada's British Columbia province one afternoon in July 2023 when she came face to face with what appeared to be a large grizzly bear. The bear initially bluff-charged the woman, which is basically a person's last warning to get away before an animal carries out their attack. The worker heeded the animal's caution and ran toward a nearby road, but it was too late, and the bear followed and viciously attacked her. After the bear ran away, the woman's coworker came to her aid, and she was rushed to the hospital with serious injuries. Thankfully, though, she survived and was expected to recover. By the time wildlife officers arrived to investigate, the bear was long gone. They found evidence of bear activity at the site, but couldn't say for sure whether the offending creature was a grizzly. Due to the defensive nature of the attack, officials believed that the animal posed little risk to the public and chose not to try trapping the bear. When news of the terrifying encounter broke, authorities took the opportunity to remind the public to take proper precautions in the wilderness, like carrying bear spray, traveling in groups, and keeping pets on a leash. 7. Amber Harris. Chris Whitehill planned to propose to his girlfriend, Amber Harris, during a trip to Yellowstone National Park in July 2023. The Arizona couple and Amber's daughter had been looking forward to the long-awaited vacation to Wyoming, where they rented a vacation cabin along the north shore of Lake Yellowstone. But before Whitehill could get on one knee and pop the question, their getaway took a terrifying turn. During a morning walk outside their cabin, Harris and Whitehill spotted 2 bison in a field. Harris later told the New York Post that one of the bison rolled around in the dirt, then rose to his feet and began walking before running toward the couple. The bison gored Harris, causing severe injuries that required her to be airlifted to the emergency room. Instead of taking in the scenery at Yellowstone, Harris spent the next several days in the hospital with 7 spinal fractures, collapsed lungs, and severe bruising. Luckily, though, the animal's horns missed her vital organs. Whitehill had originally planned to propose to Harris on a natural bridge. That was obviously no longer possible, but he still wanted to ask for Harris's hand in marriage. So he proposed at her hospital bed. And while the surroundings were perhaps a little less romantic than the original plan, Harris was no less moved by the gesture. In a Facebook post, she said that she said yes without hesitation. It's unclear how close Whitehill and Harris were to the attacking bison, but park officials advised visitors to give the animals at least 105 feet, or 32 meters of space, and to create distance if they spot any bison nearby. 6. The Cincinnati Cocaine Cat. During what began as a routine traffic stop in a Cincinnati suburb in January 2023, a 35-pound, or 16-kilogram, serval leapt out of the vehicle's open window and ran off. Native to the African savanna, servals are considered dangerous as pets and are illegal to own in Ohio. By the time wildlife experts from a local nonprofit located the wildcat, named Amory, he had a broken leg and was in an agitated state. He was becoming increasingly aggressive toward his rescuers, but he seemed to be moving around surprisingly well for a cat with a broken leg. After capturing Amory, vets ran a toxology test and discovered cocaine in his system. While it's unclear how he ingested the drugs, the anesthetic effects of the cocaine helps to explain why he was moving around fairly well despite his injuries. It may have also contributed to Amory's agitated state. Luckily, though, he got the care that he needed. Amory's owner cooperated with the investigation and avoided charges after surrendering the serval and paying for his care. Amory found a new home at the Cincinnati Zoo's Cat Ambassador Program, where he quickly began to make tremendous strides in his recovery. An update from March revealed that Amory was still unable to run or jump, but that he was doing well. His caretakers described him as young and very curious, and said that he was eating well, which was a promising sign for his continued recovery. 5. Destructive dolphins. People tend to think of dolphins as gentle creatures, but this isn't always the case. Dolphin attacks on humans are extremely rare, but not unheard of. The creatures are known to sometimes cause severe injuries, and if a dolphin wanted to kill a person, it certainly could. 4 beachgoers in Japan's Fukui Prefecture learned just how aggressive these creatures can be when they were all attacked on the same day in July 2023. It's believed that all 4 victims were attacked by the same Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphin, which came right up to the edge of the water and showed no fear of humans. A gentleman in his 60s was just 16 feet, 5 meters from the shore, when the offending creature rammed into him and bit him, leaving him with several broken ribs. Another beachgoer was bitten in the arm, and 2 others were attacked later that day, although the extent of their injuries is unclear. The next day, the same dolphin wreaked havoc on the same beach. Bystander footage showed swimmers running out of the water as the animal rushed toward a woman who was using a flotation ring. The dolphin appeared to bite the woman's feet before rushing toward a dinghy that was pulling a person on an inner tube. The aggressive encounters echoed a series of attacks that occurred in the region the previous summer. In 2022, at least 6 people were bitten by the same dolphin in the waters off Fukui Prefecture, with the most severely injured swimmer requiring 14 stitches. Dolphins seldom act aggressive toward people, but like any animal, they'll attack if they feel provoked or threatened, especially if they think someone has ignored their warning signals to create distance. The problem has gotten worse in some places where visitors are known to feed dolphins, which teaches them to rely on humans and erodes the natural fear of people that normally keeps them and us at a safe distance from one another. It's unclear what caused the attacks in Japan, but authorities have cautioned swimmers to avoid dolphins in the water and to know the warning signs to look out for when a dolphin is getting agitated. 4. Sheepherder versus black bear. A 35-year-old sheep herder from Colorado's Weminuche Wilderness was jolted awake inside his tent by a troubling noise during the early morning hours one day in July 2023. And when he went outside, he discovered a 250-pound, or 113.4 kilogram, black bear terrorizing his flock of sheep. The sheep herder shot at the bear with a .30 caliber rifle, but the bear charged at him. As a result, he sustained severe bite wounds, cuts, and scratches to his head, hand, arm, hip, and back. Luckily, though, he was able to crawl back to his tent, where he retrieved his phone and called his brother for help. Emergency responders airlifted the man to the hospital for treatment, and thankfully, he survived his injuries. At the attack site, investigators discovered 2 dead sheep with injuries consistent with a bear attack. Wildlife officials tracked the bear and put it down in accordance with their policy of euthanizing any bears that make contact with humans. It's a difficult but necessary part of the job, according to Colorado Parks and Wildlife Manager Adrian Archuleta, who said that human health and safety are the agent's top priority. 3. Holly Jenkins. 69-year-old Holly Jenkins was walking her dog in Hilton Head, South Carolina on the 4th of July when she was attacked and pulled into a lagoon by a 10-foot or 3-meter alligator. The reptile brutally mauled Jenkins and guarded her unresponsive body, hampering emergency response efforts. And by the time first responders were able to get near Jenkins, it was far too late to save her life. The alligator was removed from the property and euthanized, and Jenkins' dog was found nearby unharmed. Jenkins had been a longtime resident of the Spanish Wells community and was hosting family members for the holiday when the horrific tragedy occurred. An autopsy concluded that she died from multiple blunt force injuries. Her death marked the second fatal alligator attack in Beaufort County in less than a year. In August 2022, an 88-year-old woman was mauled to death by a gator after she slipped and fell into a pond at a senior living facility. Similarly to Jenkins' death, the gator guarded the woman's body, and it took emergency responders a full 2 hours to safely recover her remains. State wildlife experts found no evidence that anyone had recently fed the alligator that attacked Jenkins. But nevertheless, the agency cautioned the public against feeding the reptiles, which can cause gators to associate humans with food. Authorities also urged residents to avoid swimming in the morning and evening, which is when gators tend to feed, and advised civilians to stay at least 10 feet, or 3 meters, away from waters that alligators are known to hunt in. 2. Sick sea lion targets teen. While celebrating the 4th of July holiday at a beach in Del Mar, California in 2023, a teenager named Dane Blair went for a swim in the Pacific Ocean. After entering the water, he noticed a sea lion eyeballing him from about 30 feet, or 9.1 meters, before suddenly disappearing beneath the water. Then, moments later, Blair felt something clamp down on his knee, and the next thing he knew, the sea lion was sinking its teeth into his backside. Blair tried to flee to shore, but the sea lion refused to let go of him. However, he managed to get back to the beach while the animal's jaws remained firmly locked to his body. The teen finally managed to wrestle the sea lion off him and ran toward his family. The sea lion had bitten through his swim shorts and pierced his skin with its sharp teeth, leaving him with several large wounds. Luckily, though, Blair's injuries weren't too serious, and he even managed to avoid needing stitches. Blair told NBC San Diego that the sea lion looked really tired. He said that its eyes were shut and its mouth was twitching. He also stated that the animal was in visibly poor health. According to a SeaWorld spokesperson, the sea lion was suffering from the effects of a poisonous algae bloom populating the waters off the coast. While the algae bloom seems to have no ill effects on fish, it contains a neurotoxin called domoic acid, which causes ill effects and health problems in sea lions. It can cause an array of strange behavior, ranging from being comatose and lethargic to hyperactive and disoriented. This easily explains the unprovoked attack against Blair. It's extremely rare for sea lions to attack humans, so it makes sense that the animal wasn't in its right mind. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear even more stories, stay tuned for some extra content that you might have missed. 1. Mark Graham. In a near-death experience that was captured on camera, a British diver was nearly decapitated by a great white shark while swimming off South Africa's Western Cape province. 31-year-old videographer Mark Graham, who leads great white shark cage diving expeditions, was in the water near his boat with a GoPro on his head when the great white began circling the vessel. The creature was noticeably curious about Graham's GoPro and approached him to investigate. In the GoPro video, the shark could be seen swimming at a leisurely pace as it turned and headed straight toward Graham. Once the shark was just inches away from the diver, it rushed at him with its mouth wide open. The clip captured the moment the shark almost took the camera and Graham's head into its gaping jaws. Almost anyone in Graham's situation would have been terrified, but he knew that the shark was curious and meant no harm, and he stayed calm throughout the encounter. Graham told the New York Post that the collision scared people on the boat, but that he found the experience captivating, and that the shark was gentle. He said that he hoped the footage helps to dispel negative stereotypes of the great white as a vicious, man-eating monster.
19. Pitbull vs. Spaniel. A Cavalier King Charles Spaniel named Buckles had the scare of a lifetime back in 2018 when an unleashed pitbull suddenly attacked him. The 5-year-old canine and his owner Abby were walking to a park in New York City one day, simply minding their own business. Things took a horrifying turn though when they crossed paths with the pitbull, who went in a rage and took things out on Buckles, clamping its powerful jaws down on the smaller dog's throat and legs. Abby also received some scratches from the pitbull while trying to defend her beloved pet. A man eventually came over to help, put a leash on the pitbull and led the dog away without saying anything at all. In the meantime, Abby was panicking and had to rush Buckles to the vet. He was left with multiple injuries, including a disfigured jaw, and he had a long road to recovery in front of him. Thankfully, Buckles survived the ordeal. He even got his own Instagram page, which documented the harrowing journey and the healing process that followed after, including reconstructive surgery that put wires and tubes in his jaw. After the attack, the NYPD put the word out that they were searching for the pitbull's owner to make them take accountability. It's unclear whether the suspect was ever identified. Even though Buckles was expected to recover physically, his guardians were concerned that he might have a more difficult time overcoming the emotional trauma he was dealt. They told local news station ABC 30 that Buckles was a rescue dog and had a history of abuse. He'd only recently started trusting humans and other animals again before the attack. 18. Suffocated by a giant snake. 31-year-old reptile enthusiast Dan Brandon was well known among those in his circle as a responsible snake handler. So it was a shock when his rock python Tiny squeezed him to death back in 2018. The pet owner from the English village of Church Crookham was discovered dead in his bedroom, where he kept 12 tarantulas and 9 snakes, as well as Tiny. Brandon's mother testified that she was cooking dinner when she suddenly heard a crash from his bedroom. It was her son falling face first to the floor, and by the time she overheard the noise and realized something was wrong, Brandon was unresponsive. She entered Brandon's room and immediately noticed Tiny was not in her cage. Coroner Andrew Bradley concluded that the 8-foot python was probably wrapping herself around Brandon in an affectionate, not aggressive way. In other words, the snake didn't mean to asphyxiate her owner. During an inquest, Brandon's mother testified to his responsible handling practices. She pointed out that Brandon was well aware of how strong Tiny was compared to his other snakes, and that he was extra careful when handling her. But the grieving mother also said that Tiny sometimes seemed aggressive toward her son, and that the reptile had a habit of hissing and pretending to strike at Brandon, which he never took seriously. But in hindsight, it was enough to make his family wonder if maybe Tiny's aggressive side wasn't as playful as it initially seemed. Not everyone agreed that Tiny killed Brandon. Veterinarian and expert snake keeper John Cooper testified during the inquest that he was impressed with the conditions Brandon kept his snakes in, so much so that he found it hard to believe Brandon wouldn't have known how to free himself from a python. In Cooper's opinion, it was clear Brandon knew a lot about snakes. It just didn't make sense that he'd be an expert on how to take care of them, but not know how to defend himself against one. But Cooper failed to offer a viable alternative explanation for what might have happened, and the general consensus seems to be that Tiny did asphyxiate her owner, accident or not. 17. Dog gnaws owner's nose. In 2020, what started off as a normal morning for a Connecticut woman named Rebecca Olker ended in sheer terror. She was left forever changed. The 24-year-old's boyfriend was at work when she went to take her blue heeler dogs Maverick and Apollo outside to the bathroom. Rebecca instantly noticed that Maverick was acting strange. He wasn't obeying her like usual, and when she grabbed his collar to make him sit, he growled at her before leaping into an attack on her arms and hands. The unexplained aggression continued as Maverick knocked his owner down to the ground and proceeded to maul her face. He almost ripped off her upper lip and a large portion of her nose, leaving both dangling from her face. Rebecca later said that she thought she was going to die while the dog repeatedly attacked her. She called her partner, Stuart, and somehow managed to escape into an upstairs bathroom. When emergency responders got to the scene, they rushed the young woman to the hospital, where she received over 100 stitches on her face. In addition to her facial injuries, she suffered severe nerve damage to her hands. And while she lost some feeling in both her nose and upper lip, she was lucky enough to have a surgeon who did a fantastic job reattaching them. Maverick was put down not long after the attack, and the cause of his unusual behavior remains unclear to this day. 16. Deadly deer domestication. In November 2010, concerned relatives discovered 67-year-old Benjamin Gerald Rushton dead in a kennel right outside his Harrison County, Texas home. It seemed like he had been trampled on and attacked by a 500-pound European red stag deer that he was raising in his backyard, even though it's illegal in Texas to keep the animal as a pet, especially during its mating season. As you've probably guessed, it just so happened to be that special season when the deer attacked its owner. More specifically, it was the rutting period, when bucks experience heightened hormone levels, which often leads to increased aggression. Sheriff's deputies said that Rushton was feeding his deer when it suddenly became aggressive and attacked him. It was the first fatal attack of its kind in the area, according to local game wardens, who responded to the scene and fatally shot the stag to get to the victim's body. They told the media that they didn't know why Rushton was even keeping the animal in captivity. The senior citizen had multiple other wild creatures in cages on its property. It seemed that he was trying to domesticate them. Authorities found multiple deer species, including axis deer. They treated the bizarre tragedy as an opportunity to remind the public of the dangers of trying to keep wild animals as pets. Rushton's death came just 3 years after a 66-year-old exotic animal owner named John Henry Fricks was killed by a red deer in Cherokee County, Georgia. Fricks entered the deer's enclosure to feed it when the animal charged at him, piercing his chest with its antlers. Much like Rushton, it was believed that the deer was in rut when it killed Fricks. Family members told investigators that the deer had recently been acting strangely aggressive, which suggests that it was also hormonal when it attacked its owner. 15. Indiana man trampled by wildebeest. 64-year-old Klaus Dick Redant kept an array of exotic pets outside his house in North Liberty, Indiana. Around 10 o'clock a.m. one morning back in 2004, he went out to his barnyard to tend to his animals. When he failed to come back inside for lunch a few hours later, his wife Terilyn grew concerned. She went looking for her husband and saw him lying on the ground, motionless. Dick was pronounced dead at the scene not long after, despite emergency responders' best efforts to revive him. The coroner concluded that he'd been attacked by one of his 3 pet wildebeests, also called Gnu. A wildebeest is a type of antelope native to Africa. In the wild, males can grow massive curved horns, but Dick kept his wildebeest horns cut down to small nubs, likely for safety reasons. Unfortunately, the tragedy proved that even without horns, a wildebeest has the power to easily take out a human if it wants to. According to the coroner, Dick's pet rammed him multiple times, knocking him to the ground, and then proceeded to trample on him. His cause of death was listed as blunt force trauma. St. Joseph County Police Corporal Stephen Shively said that Dick was killed right at the beginning of mating season, a time when male wildebeests become particularly aggressive. He speculated that the animal may have considered its owner a threat to its chances with a nearby female. Some states are stricter than others when it comes to owning exotic pets. At least 20 states have bans, meaning it's flat out illegal to have most exotic pets, while other states require strict permits. Indiana, where Dick Radden lived, is one of a handful of states that have practically no restrictions, making it extremely easy to own many animals that are considered dangerous. But as this unfortunate tragedy shows, even when it is allowed, it's usually still not a good idea. 14. Temperamental bull takes deadly action. It wasn't exactly a secret that 52-year-old Ricky Weinhold's pet bull was dangerous. The property owners in Wernersville, Pennsylvania, where he kept the animal, even told him he needed to get rid of it. They could tell the bull had a bad disposition and believed it was responsible for an attack that happened in 2009 that left Weinhold with multiple broken ribs. But he never took the advice, and in March 2010, just one day before his 53rd birthday, the farm owner's son discovered Weinhold dead in an outdoor pen. According to Lancaster Online, his injuries were consistent with having been inflicted by the hooves and the head of a bull. Berks County Deputy Coroner Terry L. Stracker told the news outlet that Weinhold treated 10 cattle he kept at the farm like his pets. He visited them daily and spent extra time with the property shortly before his death because one of the cattle was pregnant. While it's unclear what provoked the attack itself, Weinhold's death was ruled as an accident. Nobody likes the thought of giving up a pet they can't handle, but it happens often, and it's best for both the animal and the owner to find a better arrangement. 13. Childhood-ruining chimpanzee. In 2013, the stepdaughter of a French singer named Leo Ferré released an autobiography holding shocking claims that her father's pet chimpanzee ruined her entire childhood. Annie Boutot described how she felt discarded compared to her new sibling after her parents adopted the female primate named Pepe back in 1960. They treated Pepe like another daughter. In fact, the chimp was overly spoiled. She had her very own bedroom, her own toys, and she even sat with the family for meals at the dinner table. Over time, Pepe's behavior became more and more problematic. She stole valuables and clothing from guests, occasionally bit people, and even stole a baby and took it up to the roof of the family's home, according to Boutot. But Ferré refused to see Pepe as anything other than his child, and he took deep offense to people calling her a simple animal. He reportedly said that he wasn't taming Pepe, but was raising her. Boutot claimed that the family's attendants eventually quit thanks to repeated unpleasant encounters with Ferré's growing menagerie. In addition to Pepe, the eccentric musician adopted a 770-pound pig that often watched TV in the family's living room. At some point, Boutot reached a breaking point with Pepe and moved in with her biological father to get away from the dysfunction of the Ferré household. The thrill of having exotic pets wore off for her stepfather as well, and he eventually started spending time away from the house to focus on his career instead. Ferré wasn't home when Pepe fell one day and injured herself, and when she wouldn't let her caretakers come near her, Boutot's mother made the executive decision to have the primate put down. The news of Pepe's death was not well received by Ferré, who blamed his wife for the loss. A permanent wedge was driven between the couple, and they eventually separated. Ferré wrote the song Pepe in honor of the chimpanzee. In her book, Boutot blamed her stepfather for Pepe's death. It was clear from her writing that she wasn't over the fact that she came in second to her non-human sister for most of her childhood. 12. Neglectful owner pays with his life. A neighborhood guard on the Indonesian island of Batam knew something was wrong when he noticed some abandoned luggage sitting outside 50-year-old Andre Lumboga's house back in 2011. It had been left there for 5 days. giving off the distinct impression that something might have happened to Lumboga. As the guard approached the property to see what was going on, he got an overwhelming whiff of a foul odor and decided to leave the investigation to the police. Officers discovered Lumboga's decapitated body in front of his house and his skull somewhere in his kitchen. He arrived home from a 2-week vacation on the night he went missing, so he'd most likely been dead for multiple days. Police also noticed the mauled bodies of 2 dogs on his property. Lumboga's body showed signs of having been mauled to death and eaten by his 7 pet dogs, leading investigators to think that he'd failed to give enough food to his pets during his absence. By the time he came back, they were probably starving, and after being malnourished for so long, the dogs were desperately hungry. Based on the evidence of the scene, it seemed as if the 7 remaining canines killed and ate the 2 dogs that were dead. And while it's hard to imagine what kind of person would go away for 2 weeks without feeding their dogs, it unfortunately happens more than you'd think. For Lumboga, he paid for the mistake with his life. 11. Black bear turns on caretaker. Exotic animal owner Sam Mazzola was already facing legal problems when a hired caretaker, 24-year-old Brett Kandra, was killed by a pet bear on his property in Columbia Station, Ohio back in 2010. Kandra led the bear out of its cage for feeding when the sudden attack took place. In an attempt to save the caretaker's life, Mazzola tried to get the bear to go back into its cage using a fire extinguisher, but the damage was already done. Kandra was airlifted to the hospital where he later died from his injuries, and the bear was ultimately euthanized. In the wake of the tragedy, Mazzola refused to go into detail about what happened. At the time, he was under fire by several activists who called him out for inviting people to wrestle bears at an event that previously happened in Cleveland. As a result, he lost his license to exhibit, but authorities allowed him to keep his bears, wolves, tigers, and lions. Mazzola also had prior convictions for illegally transporting and selling exotic creatures. Lorain County Sheriff's Captain James Drozdowski told the Columbus Dispatch that investigators were unsure what triggered the bear's behavior. Kandra was an experienced caretaker who worked for Mazzola for 6 years leading up to his death. The incident was officially classified as a workplace-related accident. While Mazzola wasn't feeling particularly talkative when questioned by members of the press, his neighbor, 76-year-old retired Cleveland police officer Raymond O'Leary, was more than happy to share. He told the Dispatch that it made him and other members of the neighborhood uncomfortable, knowing that Mazzola kept as many as 20 dangerous exotic animals on his property. O'Leary even claimed that a tiger got loose one time. He didn't witness it firsthand, but another neighbor showed him videos of the big cat walking through the streets. In July 2011, less than a year after the attack, Mazzola was found dead inside his house. Authorities declined to release details regarding the nature of his passing, but if we had to speculate, we'd say it was related to his pets. 10. Wolf dogs maul loving caretaker. 50-year-old Sandra Piovson was dedicated to the 9 hybrid wolf dogs that she had raised from birth. 8 of them were kept in a fenced-in area outside her home in Salem Township, Pennsylvania, while 1 lived inside Sandra's home with her 2 Rottweilers. Her loved ones were less enthusiastic about the animals, especially after one of the wolf dogs attacked Sandra's friend a few years prior in 2010. The friend declined to file a complaint, but the incident only heightened existing fears that the half-wild canines would escape their enclosure someday and hurt or kill someone else. Unfortunately, these concerns were completely justified. In May 2012, Sandra was spotted dead inside her wolf dog's cage. She'd been viciously mauled. Since nobody saw the attack, the cause will never be known. 8 of the wolf dogs were put down following the fatal mauling. Opinions are divided on whether wolf dogs are more dangerous than domestic canines. Proponents of the pets tend to acknowledge that they require strict training, but claim that attacks on humans are even rarer than some domestic breeds. Those who think it's a bad idea to crossbreed domestic dogs with wolves argue that attacks are more likely because hybrid dogs lack the natural fear of humans wolves have. In other words, while wolves tend to avoid people, wolf dogs don't, but they're still equipped with some of the natural instincts that could cause a wild wolf to become aggressive. 9. Farmer devoured by feasting hogs. 69-year-old Terry Vance Garner went outside to feed his animals one morning in 2012 and never came back. His loved ones were faced with a horror scene later that day when they got worried and went to look for him at his farm in Coos County, Oregon. The missing senior citizen's body parts were scattered throughout a pig pen, making it clear that his hogs had attacked and eaten him. There was no question whether the 700-pound beasts were capable of killing a person. At the same time, the circumstances created a highly unusual situation. Investigators made sure to leave no stone unturned as they worked to piece together what happened to the farmer. Terry's remains were too mangled for the medical examiner to narrow down a particular cause of death. While authorities initially hesitated to rule out foul play, they eventually decided that a crime did not occur. They found it was more likely that he simply fell into the pig pen, possibly as the result of a heart attack or some other medical emergency. It was also possible that the hogs knocked him over on purpose. At least one of the pigs acted aggressively toward Garner in the past, according to his brother Michael, who said that a female hog had bitten Terry's hand before. Terry planned to euthanize the sow after the incident, but later changed his mind. Unfortunately for Terry's family, it was impossible to answer every question about his death. 8. Lion owner loses battle against big cat. It doesn't take a genius to understand that it's dangerous to keep big cats as pets, which is why 34-year-old Michael Prasik's neighbors weren't thrilled that he was keeping an African lion and lioness on his property in the Czech town of Chechov. He acquired the male in 2016 and the female a few years later in 2018 and bred them for his business, despite lacking the necessary permits to own them in the first place. In fact, Prasik had been denied permission to build cages for the lions and was fined at least once for illegal breeding practices. But he refused to let government officials onto his land during the ongoing feud, and authorities lacked the resources to forcibly relocate the lions. There was also no evidence of cruelty towards the creatures, giving law enforcement less of a reason to actually intervene. And even though a permit was needed, it wasn't exactly illegal for Prasik to have the beasts. So even though nobody thought it was a good idea for him to have the pets, he still got to keep them. The long-running disagreement came to an end in March 2019, when Prasik's father discovered his son's mutilated body in the male lion's pen. He had been mauled to death, validating his neighbor's fears in the worst possible way. Responding police officers had no choice but to shoot the lions in order to reach Prasik's body. 7. Watch goat attacks elderly owner. In a story so strange it had to be fact-checked by Snopes, a 110-pound goat named Snowball killed its abusive owner in 1991. 71-year-old retired poultry worker Kyle Halsey wanted to turn the docile animal into an aggressive watchdog to keep an eye on his property in Cherokee County, Georgia. In an attempt to turn the goat against humans altogether, he regularly beat it with sticks. As you can imagine, Snowball eventually grew tired of the intense abuse. Carl's wife, Alma Halsey, even warned him that if he continued mistreating the animal, it would eventually kill him. But her words fell on deaf ears, and the day finally came when Snowball turned against his cruel owner. The billy goat knocked Carl down twice as he ran to escape, but Snowflake caught up and charged at him again, knocking him off a porch and onto the ground below. Carl fell about 5 feet and died right where he landed. The coroner concluded that he succumbed to blunt trauma to the abdominal cavity from being repeatedly hit by Snowflake. In almost every case, a pet who kills their owner is put down. But Snowflake received a massive amount of sympathy from the public, while Carl's death received less attention, sparking a widespread campaign to spare the abused goat. Activists overwhelmed animal control with calls, pleading with officials not to kill Snowflake, while offers to adopt him came flooding in. Some people even threatened authorities, with one caller saying that what happens to Snowflake will happen to you, which isn't okay, but it just goes to show the level of dedication that went into saving this goat's life. The people spoke, and those in charge actually listened. Any and all consideration of euthanasia was taken off the table, and Snowflake was moved to an animal sanctuary in Illinois, where he was free to live out the rest of his life in safety and comfort. Some activists went as far as saying that Halsey's death was well-deserved karma, while others argue that it's never in good taste to be happy about the death of a human. How do you feel? Let us know in the comments below. 6. Monitor lizards munch on owner. In what's been described as one of the most terrifying and bizarre instances of a person being eaten by their pets, 42-year-old Ronald Huff's lifeless body was found in 2002 on the floor of his Delaware apartment, surrounded by his 7 Nile monitor lizards. The unusual pets were feasting on their owner, and it remains unclear whether the reptiles killed Huff or if they simply fed on his remains after his death. Police discovered the tragedy after being dispatched to Huff's apartment for a welfare check. The exotic pet owner's neighbor, Jeff Wildonga, told the press that he could see that a large portion of Huff's face had been devoured, saying, "I could see his molars up where his ears should have been." While an autopsy was inconclusive, Huff's former boss Mike Cassidy seemed to believe that it was possible the lizards ate him. Speaking with the US Sun, Cassidy said that Huff had previously shown him a few bite injuries that were caused by the pets, indicating that he had been attacked in the past. Additionally, Cassidy claimed Huff's body was positioned in a way that made it seem as if he was trying to escape his apartment when he died. He also said that a police officer told him Huff might have still been alive when the lizard started eating him. Reaching lengths of up to 8 feet, the Nile monitor lizard is one of Africa's longest lizards. The species typically feeds on prey much smaller than humans though, like rodents, birds, and other mammals. But Nile monitor lizards are not picky. They're generally considered dangerous to keep as a pet thanks to their sharp teeth and venom, which is usually not fatal to humans but can come with some negative side effects. Unfortunately, the role that Huff's lizards may have played in his death will forever remain a mystery. 5. Ming of Harlem. Anyone who's lived in New York City will be quick to tell you that most apartments aren't even big enough to house a family comfortably, let alone a 400-pound wildcat. But Anthony Yates didn't let that stop him. The part-time taxi driver was determined to own a tiger, and in 2001 he bought an 8-week-old Siberian Bengal tiger hybrid. He welcomed the cat into his Harlem apartment, where he already had a 5-foot-long alligator named Al. A baby tiger hardly seems threatening, but Yates quickly realized how fast big cats grow. It wasn't long before the animal named Ming was eating 20 pounds of meat per day. Yates did his best to keep on with caring for and entertaining an animal he had no professional experience with in a space that was far too small. Over the next few years, neighbors at the housing complex complained to authorities about an overwhelming urine smell coming from the apartment. But the tiger's presence somehow flew under the radar until October 2003, when Yates showed up to an emergency room with a bite wound that he claimed came from a pit bull. Doctors could tell immediately that the injury was caused by an animal with a much larger jaw, so they contacted the NYPD. Officers snuck a tiny camera into the apartment and discovered that the doctors were correct in their suspicions that Yates had been bitten by something he definitely shouldn't have been keeping as a pet. An officer rappelled down the building's exterior and shot Ming with a tranquilizer dart from outside the building. The tiger was removed and relocated to a sanctuary, where he spent the rest of his life in a suitable environment. As it turns out, neighbors were aware that Yates kept a lot of pets, including exotic animals. Ming's presence was somewhat of an urban legend, but on some level people knew something strange was going on inside the apartment, especially since Yates came home from the market with so much meat every day. At one point, he even had a roommate, and he never even warned her about Ming or Al. Caroline Domingo, who rented a room in the apartment with her husband, told the New York Daily News that she was shocked when she saw Ming, but that she eventually got used to the tiger. She said that Yates kept the apartment clean and that he treated Ming like his baby. Yates later pleaded guilty to reckless endangerment and possessing a wild animal. He was sentenced to 5 years probation and banned from owning animals. During an interview with the New York Times in 2020, he stood by his belief that he wasn't doing anything wrong by owning a pet tiger. He insisted he never endangered the public and that he's an animal lover, not a criminal. Yates even said that he still hoped to someday realize his vision of creating an animal sanctuary. Hopefully, he'll do it somewhere other than his living room. 4. Elk vs. Ranch Hand. In 2006, a 1,000-pound, 7-point bull elk attacked a ranch hand in Moffat County, Colorado. Nicknamed Clyde, the 9-year-old elk spent all of his life in captivity at the property, and there had never been any previous issues with his behavior. Employees found the bloody body of 56-year-old John Renner in a feeding trough inside Clyde's pen. Speaking with the Denver Post, Moffat County Sergeant Rick Holford said that based on Renner's injuries, it looked like he was tossed around a lot. Clyde still had blood on his antlers and was acting aggressive when Holford and other deputies got to the scene. While the elk had apparently never acted like this before, this was far from a freak incident. Like a few other cases on today's list, it happened during rutting season. Simply put, Clyde's hormone levels were elevated and he was trying to show his dominance. According to Holford, he was defending his territory. He was a wild animal acting like a wild animal. Ranch owner Lou Wyman, whose experience raising elk dated back to 1968, said that Renner was specifically told not to enter Clyde's enclosure. He'd only been working at the ranch for 2 weeks when the incident happened. 3. Camel sits on caretaker. Kathy Ake had a wide array of both common and unusual pets, including a collection of Pomeranians, monkeys, wallabies, and a 1,800-pound camel named Polo. She showcased her strange pets at her 15-acre exotic animal farm in Wewa-Hitchcock, Florida up until April 2007, when Polo attacked her in front of a local news crew during a visit to the property. The 55-year-old was trying to leave the camel's enclosure when the animal suddenly kicked and sat on her, crushing her to death. Kathy's husband Donnie was at work when the tragedy started to unfold and came home in the middle of it. A reporter called 911, but by the time emergency responders arrived and moved Polo, it was too late to save Kathy. Dalton Upchurch, who was the sheriff at the time, told the Ocala Star-Banner that he believed there was not much Kathy could have done in the midst of the deadly situation to save herself. Speaking with ABC News in the aftermath of his wife's death, Donnie said that the couple bought Polo at an auction just 3 weeks earlier. He thought that their new pet was just agitated because it was breeding season. In keeping with Kathy's belief in being kind to animals, Donnie said that he planned to find another home for Polo and not euthanize him. 2. Trampled by an antelope. As the owner of a 60-acre exotic animal park in Varrisburg, New York, Hans Boxler Sr. had over 40 different species, including camels, zebras, wildebeests, llamas, emu, bison, and ostriches. The farm also held a large species of Asian antelope called a nilgai, which resembles a strange cross between a cow and an antelope and can weigh over 600 pounds. Boxler was a lifelong animal lover who always approached his pets with respect for their instincts and behaviors. He also prioritized safety when it came to caring for and interacting with his creatures. So when the 81-year-old failed to come home one night in 2016 after heading out to feed his menagerie, his loved ones weren't sure what went wrong. They found the senior citizen's lifeless body the next morning after noticing that a nilgai somehow escaped its enclosure. The antelope was still confined by an outer fence, but by getting out of its pen, it was able to come into direct contact with Boxler. His body was covered in blunt force injuries, making it clear that the nilgai trampled over him. In a statement, a family member described Boxler's death as shocking, considering the amount of caution he used when dealing with his animals. It was the first and only accident to ever happen at the property, and since nobody saw it happen, the antelope's reasons for attacking its owner will forever stay a mystery. 1. Rabid pets lash out. It's common knowledge that household pets can contract rabies from wild animals and pass it to owners, but it happens so rarely in the United States that we usually don't even think about it. In November 2022, a pet owner in Brunswick County, North Carolina, was attacked by their injured cat. They did the smart thing and took the cat to the vet where it was diagnosed with rabies. The feline was behind on its vaccines, which seems to happen pretty often, despite most states having a requirement for pet owners to keep their animal shots up to date. By acting quickly, the owner was able to avoid getting rabies. While it's possible to prevent the disease after being bitten by an affected animal, a person has to act quickly. Once the disease sets in, there's nothing doctors can do to stop it from getting worse, and it's practically a guaranteed death. Around 90% of reported rabies cases happen in wild animals, with just a few hundred cases of household cats contracting the disease each year in the US. It's even rarer for dogs to get rabies, with just 60 to 70 cases being reported annually nationwide. In 2018, a pet dog grew aggressive and bit his 2 owners in Houston, Delaware. Its rabies shots were not up to date at the time, and the canine tested positive for rabies. Once again, the owners got treatment in time to stop themselves from getting the disease, but the outcome could have been much worse. These rare but life-threatening cases are a grim reminder that it's a good idea to not take any unnecessary chances if your pet suddenly becomes nasty toward you or isn't acting like themselves.
Would you rather live in a part of Florida with a high alligator population, or in a remote cabin in an area where a lot of bears are known to dwell? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.